Through the different brewing methods, cuppings, shops, and interviews I've experienced over the past few months, I've come to believe that coffee is subjective. Everyone can have a unique way to experience it that's perfect for them. Because with so many options, there's no black and white answer, and we have to find a gray area. I'm Elle Grayson, and this is the Coffee Shop Project.
Hey, so my name is Amanda Paparelli. I have been in the coffee industry for a little over a decade. And currently I'm a consultant, so I'm a QGrader, which means I have been a coffee taster for years. And I'm currently working with clients on product development, kind of quality supply chain consulting. And my husband and I have also just founded our own coffee tech company called mCultivo, which puts inventory management and process management tools in the hands of coffee mills at an affordable price.
So, did you write a program to do that, or is it a special machine? How does that work?
Sure. It's so we've essentially built a lean enterprise resource system for coffee mills. So our technology partner developed all the code and built a web-based platform that coffee mills can log on to and manage their inventory, manage their samples, manage communication with their farmer groups, and manage kind of their entire supply chain from receiving coffee to selling coffee, and it's all in one place for them. And that, we just found after talking to a lot of farmers, producers, people who worked at Origin, this was a real need, and this was just something that people, it's not that they weren't tracking it, but there just wasn't a great solution for them. And so we talked to probably 50 producers and 50, not just producers, but 50 kind of people along the supply chain, and kind of came to the conclusion that this is what we were going to work on, and this would be our next project. So that's what we've been doing for the last 6 months.
That's really cool. But then you said that you started in QGrading, and I didn't even know QGrading was a thing coming into starting this whole little podcast, and I never heard of it until I talked to Chad Crossan a couple months ago. Could you kind of give a summary of what QGrading is for someone that just has no idea what's going on?
Yeah, so QGrading is essentially a credentialed way of evaluating coffee according to certain standards. So as a QGrader, I have been certified by the Coffee Quality Institute. They're an international nonprofit, and they have established standards along with the Specialty Coffee Association on how to evaluate, grade, and score physical green coffee, so the coffee you would purchase to roast, so coffee before it's roasted, and then they've assigned a scoring system to brewed coffee. So we taste coffee and we evaluate it for certain attributes, and then we assign a score to those attributes. And if a coffee is Q certified, it means it's scored 80 points or higher on a 100-point scale. So that's a very 30,000-foot view of what QGrading is.
The coffee that, if you go to the grocery store or a specialty coffee supplier, how many of the coffees that we drink on a day-to-day basis have earned the Q certification?
That's a good question. Probably not very many, but there's a decent reason for that. Grocery store coffees probably aren't meeting the Q quality certification, just because they're such high volume coffees that, those aren't necessarily meeting a niche specialty market flavor profile or demographic. So those are really, really mass market. They're typically lower quality, so they're not going to meet that Q standard. In coffee shops, though, we got coffee at, Dancing Goats a couple of weeks ago, and so the coffees they're buying may not be technically Q certified, so they may have not gone through the actual certification process, but more than likely a Q grader tasted, bought, roasted, and then put those coffees out into the market. So what you kind of see now, the Q certification has been around for 20 years now, I think. I know they were founded in 96, but I'm not sure when exactly the certification process started. So instead of necessarily submitting coffees to the CQI to say, hey, will you certify this coffee so I know how good it is, Q graders have kind of just been absorbed into the supply chain. People are getting certified, they're taking jobs, on the farm level, at the export level, import level, and then, on the consuming side, you have roasters and cafe owners or people at larging, roasting, roaster companies that are influencing those purchasing decisions and being able to kind of guide the coffee quality, I guess, in that way. So it may not be Q certified, but people are still using that standard to buy and sell coffee.
So how many Q graders are there worldwide? Is it a very small number, or are there way more than I think?
If you ask my mom, I'm probably one of 200. That's how special it is. I think it is more like 3,500 Q graders worldwide.
Wow.
So I guess when you think about how big the coffee supply chain is, and for example, there's probably 25 million, small farmers out there that contribute to the coffee we drink every day. It's really not that many. But it is a growing number, and it is constantly changing because you do have to keep up your certification. So in order to say, yes, I'm a Q grader, I have to recertify every 3 years to prove that I can still do it.
What does getting recertified look like? Do you have to go through all the testing again, or is it a smaller condensed version of it?
Oh, thank God, it is a smaller condensed version of it. I think if you had to do the whole test again, I might not do it. It was pretty intense.
So what is preparing for the test like? Is it more like you go to a class with a bunch of people kind of getting a college degree, or is it independent study, or a balance of both?
My experience was definitely an independent study. Okay. You can take classes, the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, they offer tons of cupping certification, so you can kind of start out as a beginning coffee taster, and there's some levels to that, and they say that's a precursor to taking the Q. You can take kind of these sensory classes. I think CQI offers pre-Q classes, so again, more formal ways of studying and preparing for the test. I did it all on my own, so I just kind of talked to people who have done it. I got certified in 2015, so thankfully there's a lot of people who were, blogging about it, saying, hey, this is what I did to prepare, and there were plenty of ways to figure out how to do kind of a self-study. And so I was just kind of training alongside my job for about 6 months before I took it.
Wow.
Just cupping different coffees, doing the Linné kit, which I know you've done, doing all the smells, and just having my coworkers set up all these tests for me. It was mostly on my own, but there are avenues for more formal preparation.
What inspired you to want to get that high standard of a Q grader certification?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the time my job demanded it. So at the time I was working as kind of a director of a supply chain for a newish company. So still setting up our relationships with producers and where we were buying coffee and how we were buying coffee. And so in building out that supply chain, I knew that I wanted to adhere to the most rigorous standards, and also it just kind of lends a validation and a credibility, not only to my position, but to the entire company. So we can say, oh yeah, we have these types of people that are adhering to these standards. And also it gives you a language to talk about coffee. It gives you something to center on when you're talking about all these different coffees and what they taste like and what you need and what people have to offer. It literally is kind of its own language. And so that was really helpful to me as we were dealing directly, or most of the time directly, or very closely with producers in other countries. So my Spanish isn't fantastic, but I really am able to communicate fairly effectively about what our needs are, and maybe this coffee didn't work out this time, and here's why. So it's a really, really great tool for connecting buyers and sellers, but also to say, okay, here's what I taste in the coffee, and that might signify something going on at some level of processing that coffee, and it just gives you a language to help improve coffee, essentially.
So it's kind of like a universal standard across the industry, regardless of what language you speak. You can all come together and converse based on that standard.
Yes.
You were an in-house Q grader almost for the supply chain you were working with, right?
Yes.
Is it normal for companies to hire on specific Q graders, or is it more like a freelance job where a company could call you and be like, hey, we need you to do X, Y, Z? Is it a mixture of both, or is it kind of one or the other?
Yeah, it's a mixture of both. So because I'm a consultant now, it's a very, it's great to have that skill set. I love being able to offer that. And I think it also lends some credibility to the other experiences I've had. And I think most consultants are that way. If people are freelance in the coffee industry, chances are they're probably Q graders, because it's just such a I think, highly sought after skill and a respected certification. But they're, in larger companies, you might have a dedicated quality staff with several Q graders on it. You don't have to be a Q grader to get hired on as a coffee taster, but it would certainly, obviously, probably get you higher up in that, in that staff. But if you're working at more like a local independent place, and you're a Q grader, you're probably also the owner of the company, you're probably the roaster, you're probably the buyer. So I would say it can be a standalone job where all you do is taste coffee all day, every day, and you're communicating those results to people. But more likely than not, I think it's probably an additional skill set, or kind of, it might be like the skill set that your job is centered around, but you're doing a bunch of other things, and you're wearing a lot of different hats.
If you were to go, and I guess I don't know, what would you do today? Like, you said that you evaluate green coffee, but you also taste finished coffee. What would like a project look like for you?
So a project might be, we have a new client, and they're based on their volume and their demographic and what type of coffee they want. So let's say they wanted an espresso. It was a company, we have to make an espresso blend for them. So we'd look at what their price points are, how much volume they need, kind of where they're selling, or is their demographic younger? Are they more in tune with the specialty coffee movement, or is it maybe outside of that movement, so maybe more mainstream? So we'd look at when they needed coffee, how much coffee they needed, what price point they needed at, and that would kind of set off the project of going hunting for those coffees, or for the right coffees that were going to fit that. And so we would get green samples in, so we'd get unroasted samples in from a lot of different producers all over the world, and we'd figure out we'd roast those and taste all those coffees, and then we'd start kind of weeding coffees in and out, saying, okay, this one, met the quality we're looking for, or this one did too, but it's not the price point we need, or they don't have enough coffee that we need to fill this order. And so you kind of start like weeding out what you're looking for, and you start building a blend that way. And you just kind of work your way through that process. And then you eventually start roasting those coffees and developing the roast profile for that blend. And you do equipment testing after that. Once you have your blend, you kind of, so in my previous jobs, I've kind of done a lot of that. I think a lot of curators don't do the entire development project. They might just get handed coffee samples, taste them, and then give that information back. I loved being involved in like the entire project in my previous company, and so it was great to be able to source coffee, taste coffee, and then develop that for the end user. And so that was really fun to like go through that journey, and then you actually get to like put it in the machine they're going to brew it on, and they taste it, and they're like, oh, this is great, this is what we're looking for. That's a really rewarding journey, and it's a very long journey. So that whole process could take 6 months to a year to make that happen, depending on the timeline. If you are actually sourcing and developing a product specifically for someone, that's probably a 6-month plus project.
That's insane. Wow. So you mentioned, and you were like describing if you were helping pick a blend or create a blend for someone, you mentioned like if it was geared towards younger people and their audience. Can you gauge what coffee like flavor profiles or origins will sell better based on the demographic that it will be sold to, like based on palate development?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes yes. It always, I mean, this isn't just true for coffee, but you want to talk to your customers. So you want to know what they're drinking, what their habits are, what price points they purchase their coffee at, where they purchase their coffee. So if, we're talking, say, okay, what's your favorite coffee shop to go to get coffee?
Oh, my favorite one here, it's Valor and Alpharetta.
Oh, I love Valor. They're awesome.
They really are.
Okay. So what do you get when you go there?
I like getting a cortado because I like tasting the coffee and then having a little bit of milk to lighten it.
I love that. So you're not a black coffee drinker, but you are not a flavored coffee drinker necessarily.
Yeah, I'll drink black coffee, but I prefer having just like a tiny bit of milk.
Okay. I mean, obviously, so you would obviously ask a ton more questions than that, but that kind of helps me know that you are willing to pay a premium. You like to taste the coffee, but you like, maybe some milky things. So that would start telling me a little bit about kind of what that product needs to look like. It's not going to be a super light, like high acidity, fruity roast. It maybe is a little bit closer to mainstream, but still really high quality with some really distinct notes to that coffee. So it's not going to be necessarily just like a dark Starbucks roast where that's all you taste, So that's that's not a scientific exercise we went through by any means. But I think that's really, really important, obviously, to developing any product ever, but especially in coffee, is you have to know who you are developing your coffee for. And different people have different preferences. In the specialty world, we kind of think everyone likes what we like because you go to Valor and I go to Valor and we really like that shop, but still more people are going to Starbucks every day than are going to Valor. And so even though Valor is taking off and they have like a great business and they make great coffee and we both think they make great coffee, we could ask 10 more people and they would go, oh no, I don't like this. It's, too bright. It's too fruity. I don't like this note or that note. And so you really do have to talk to your customer.
Do you think more people are inclined not to be adventurous with shops like that are more local and tend to like veer towards Starbucks and Dunkin' because it's all they've ever known and don't really understand what's beyond that?
Yeah, I think maybe it can be confusing. Like you kind of don't know where to start. Like, you just said, oh, my favorite thing is a cortado, but what's a cortado? Most people probably have no idea what a cortado is. And so it just might be a little bit daunting to walk into a shop and to not know how to speak that language, essentially.
Daunting is a really good way to put it, because when I started like going beyond buying Starbucks beans, my friends would come over and they wouldn't like specific coffees because, back to your point, it wasn't what they were familiar with, and it was a different blend. They could actually taste the flavor profile versus having it be super burnt, which was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I think there was a big push in the last probably 10 years in the specialty coffee industry for baristas to be, kind of the experts. And, when you walk into a coffee shop, they're going to tell you what's good. They're going to tell you how you should, drink their coffee. And it was, I think that was kind of like born out of like an inherently good desire to introduce people to higher quality specialty coffee. But I think naturally people react to that not always positively.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I just want a cup of coffee. Why do you have to make it so complicated? And why do you have to be a jerk about it? Like, I'm just here to buy your coffee.
Right.
Why are you talking down to me? So I think we kind of the specialty industry, shot ourselves in the foot a little bit because we came out too strong. Like, oh no, you have to like this coffee, or I'm going to push this coffee on you. And I think, to your point, probably could have done a better job inviting people along and having a slow, okay, you like a cortado now. Maybe you would like just this, black coffee with a little cream, and then in another year or two, you might just be drinking black coffee. I think we tried to force it a little bit.
So how do you think the forcing it in conjunction with the movement towards specialty coffee plays into the idea that your coffee experience is subjective versus is there a set way to do it based on your skills as a QGrader and knowledge there?
So let me make sure I have that question right. So you're saying...
I phrased it weirdly. Sorry.
That's okay. So how does that kind of work?
I guess if there's a set standard.
Yeah, go ahead.
If there's a set standard to how coffee should be based on what you've learned as a QGrader and based on baristas' educations, do you think that coffee can actually be subjective, or is there a scientific right way to experience it?
There's not a scientific right way to experience it. It's definitely subjective. Even after being a QGrader, I still like what I like. I prefer what I prefer in a coffee. And so there is a distinction here. So when we're talking about Q grading, we're talking about understanding what makes coffee good from a different, not from a preference point of view. We're kind of talking about, is this coffee free of any defects? So a lot of things can go wrong when you're processing coffee.
Okay.
And so part of the Q process is making sure that the coffees we're tasting and approving and buying and putting out in the marketplace are clean, and they meet kind of some basic standards, but they also kind of raise the bar in terms of the care and effort that farmer put into that coffee. And so part of the Q process is just making sure farmers are, or trying to make sure that farmers are adequately compensated and rewarded for producing higher quality coffee. And so that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about objective quality from a Q grading standpoint. So from like coffees that are higher quality, you're going to have a range of different flavors and experiences within the coffee, like within high quality coffee.
Right.
And so I would say there's no kind of accounting for preference or taste. You might prefer like a darker roast or something with a richer body, something more, earthy or chocolatey. I might prefer something that's higher in acidity and lighter bodied. And those can both be kind of objectively good coffees from a Q standpoint, but are completely up to our own individual taste preference. And so I don't think there's to me, like personally, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care if you like Brazilian coffee or you like Kenyan coffee. It's all good and it all serves a purpose.
A really oversimplified standpoint, you could say that like there's an objective way to do it and an objective level of quality, but the experience and choices you make as the consumer can be subjective.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Coffee Shop Project. Amanda gave me so much amazing information to share with you guys, and I have decided to split it up into 2 parts. So this Wednesday, there will be a bonus video coming out, so subscribe down below, and I hope to see you there. Bye, guys.